Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our first presentation, Australian Mobility, Ripe for Collaboration.
Hello and welcome to Australian Mobility Ripe for Collaboration. I'm Bill Hampton, the founder and editor-in-chief of AutoBeat Daily and its sister publication, the Advanced Mobility Project. AutoBeat Daily is an online newsletter about the business of the global auto industry. The Advanced Mobility Project focuses on the transition from the traditional model of individual ownership of manually driven vehicles to the world of connectivity, autonomous driving, and multimodal options for personal transportation. You already know that the world of intelligent highway systems is truly a global phenomenon, and that's certainly true for Australia. Today we have some of Australia's top IHS experts here to tell you about what's going on in Australia in terms of connectivity, autonomous vehicles, and intermodal transportation. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, who is Peter Sweatman. Peter is co-founder of Kavita, the California-based company that provides expert advice about the convergence of autonomous and connected vehicle technologies. He's also a professor advisor for the University of Melbourne's AIMS program. That's short for Australian Integrated Multimodal Ecosystem, and you'll be hearing more about that in a minute. Previously, Peter was a longtime director of the University of Michigan Transportation Research Institute. He also founded and is past director of M-City, the mobility test facility in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He currently co-chairs the Washington, D.C.-based Transportation Research Board's Forum on Automated Vehicles and Shared Mobility. Peter,
Thank you,
welcome.
Bill. Thank you, Bill. Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Peter Sweatman, and I've got a foot in both camps, having spent 12 years living in Ann Arbor, working at the University of Michigan, and then with our startup, Kavita, we operate out of California, I'm pleased to say, and so it gives me some perspective on this question of transformational technology around the world. So we are indeed in a global era of digital mobility, and really to open doors internationally with the help of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, we've set up a Memorandum of Understanding, or an MOU, between Michigan and Australia. So this seemed like a good idea at the time. And we've been here this week to really kind of flesh that out and see what we're going to do. And I think many doors are going to be opened. So a lot of cooperation between government and particularly research organisations here in Michigan and throughout Australia. So we've been had a great day yesterday talking to M-City, American Centre for Mobility, and so on. You know, I can attest through personal experience the leadership role that the state of Michigan has played not only nationally but internationally on connected and automated vehicles in particular, or CAV. Now, we've got a few examples there. And the way it's been pulled together here, and particularly this wonderful umbrella of Planet M and the Michigan Council on Future Mobility. Back in Australia, there's a tremendous recognition of the societal benefits of CAV, and in a recent study concluded that 97% of Victorians would be better off with widespread use of CAV, and that's one reason we're here and so eager to learn from our friends here in Michigan. Various test beds have been developed, and certainly Majid Savi is going to talk about the AIMS test bed. Test beds are critical in this, and that's how we move things forward. So what do we call it? Model deployments. But, you know, if we have some radically different technology with a lot of questions surrounding it, not the least would be how consumers would react to it, then we need these test beds, and we have them all around the world because conditions are so different everywhere. We can't cover all the conditions in one place. So the automated driving system, or the ADS, is a critical factor that's being tested around the world. So the AIMS test bed that you're going to hear about from Majid is also very complementary to other test beds in Australia that are for connected vehicle work. And we're looking for a common base of testing capabilities. So we're very, very ambitious and positive about this MOU as a vehicle for collaboration. And my colleagues are going to tell you why and why we want to, what we have to offer and the sort of issues that we'd like to work on. So thank you very much. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Peter. Our next panelist is Roland Pittar. He heads Australia's Office of Future Transportation Technology, which is part of the Department of Infrastructure, Regional Development and Cities. The office works with numerous stakeholders across Australia to prepare for the safe and efficient deployment of advanced transportation options, including highly automated vehicles. Roland?
Thank you very much, Bill, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here at the North American International Automotive Show and to have the opportunity to talk about a bit of what's going on in Australia and the great connections that we're in the process of making with Michigan and via the MEDC. My name is Roland Pittar, and thank you very much for the introduction, Bill. I'd like to talk briefly about Australia's preparations for the commercial deployment of connected and automated vehicles, and in so doing, covering three main points. Firstly, a little bit about the Australian context. Secondly, touching on the work of the Australian government and other governments around Australia to prepare for automated vehicles. And thirdly, the Memorandum of Understanding between the governments of Australia and Michigan. So firstly, a little bit about the Australian context. Like the US, Australia has a federal system of government. And with responsibilities spread between those various levels of government. So we are approximately the same size as the continental US, but we are comprised, rather than of 50 states, around 8 states and territories. We have a federal system of responsibility. And the federal government, for example, has responsibility around funding towards road and rail infrastructure under a national partnership agreement with the states and territories. States and territories have responsibilities including road operations, driving laws, in-service vehicle regulation and driver licensing. And local government responsibilities include things like local road operations, development planning and approvals. So the, if you like, regulatory ecosystem for developing and updating to accommodate for automated vehicles needs to take all of that into account. So we in Australia are working towards developing nationally consistent frameworks for connected and automated vehicles. And it's a challenge, but we aim to have consistent frameworks by the early 2020s in order to accommodate what vehicle manufacturers are telling us are likely to be higher level automated vehicles available for commercial deployment. Australia, whilst a large country, is quite unique in terms of the world's in the world in terms that it is a very highly urbanised country. Over 60% of the population live in the 5 largest cities, and 90% of the population lives in urban areas, which means, by extension, that large parts of the country are very sparsely populated. Those regional areas, though, are very productive in terms of export-orientated industries coming from mining, agricultural and pastoral industries. Given that sort of dynamic, we have large distances between our cities and regional areas, high rates of vehicle ownership compared to many other countries, and our population drives large distances by vehicles compared to many other countries, and perhaps not quite so, perhaps we're a little bit behind the US in that regard, but in comparison to other countries, we are still quite a quite car-centric economy. We are also home to a lot of activity, and my other speakers will touch on this too, in the automated vehicle space. While we no longer have industries involved in manufacturing automobiles, we have carved out a niche in the automated vehicle space. We are a world leader in the use of automated vehicle technology in the mining sector, for example. An Australian company, Coda Wireless, is a leading supplier of applications for the connected and automated vehicle market, including to General Motors here in Michigan. Coda develops hardware and software that enables automated vehicles to connect with other vehicles and with smart infrastructure. According to Coda, their technology is used in more than 60% of vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communications around the world. Another company, which is based in Canberra, the capital, Seeing Machines. Seeing Machines is an industry leader in computer vision technologies that provide real-time alerts when fatigue or distraction is detected by driver-facing sensors. The system works in all light conditions and even where the driver is wearing sunglasses. So I want to talk briefly about the Australian government's work to prepare for automated vehicles. And this again is a collaborative effort across all governments. Australia's transport ministers, state, territory and federal level, have agreed on a national policy framework to prepare for Australia in the automated and emerging transport technology vehicle space. And that has an action plan associated with it. It doesn't mean that everything happens at a national government level. What it recognises is that the states and the territories and other entities, research institutions and the like, are rightly working in this space, but seeks to coordinate and leverage the expertise and comparative advantage that sits around the country. Second thing I'd mention is that late last year, Australia's Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Michael McCormack, announced an increased focus on preparing Australia for emerging technologies. And he announced the establishment of the new Office of Future Transport Technology, which I've been asked to lead. This office will build on existing work underway and is responsible for leading and coordinating, as well as communicating the efforts that that Australia is undertaking in preparing for emerging transport technology and enabling connected and automated vehicles to operate legally and safely on Australia's roads. This does include working with all levels of government, with industry and with academia in preparing for automated vehicles' arrival. So there are a range of facets of work in this vein across legislative and regulatory reform, across data and cybersecurity, supporting research and trials, and of course this is informed greatly by our international relationships and partnerships with governments around the world who are all grappling with similar issues. So that, oops, sorry, I do want to go back if I can. Yes, thank you. That brings me to the MOU between the Australian government and the government of Michigan, I'd just like to acknowledge the work of the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and Kevin Kerrigan and his team in working with us in preparing for and settling the MOU, which was signed in October of last year. We see that MOU as critical. As our Deputy Prime Minister said in the media release when this was signed, Michigan is a global leader in automotive innovation, and so we see a partnership with Michigan through an MOU as being a key enabler of partnerships and sharing information and collaboration between Australia and Michigan. In this rapidly evolving environment, these partnerships are critically important. Through the MOU, we see Australia, through industry partnerships, through research partnerships, being able to better establish linkages with counterparts in Michigan, collaborating on projects together, sharing scientific, technological, regulatory and policy learnings. It's a dynamic and challenging space. Wherever we can find efficiencies, wherever we can leverage learnings, we are going to get key benefits, we think, on the outcomes that this technology is looking to deliver around safety, around addressing congestion, around improving productivity and efficiency. So we are really excited by this MOU and what we believe will be the mutual benefits that it will deliver as we move toward the successful deployment of connected and automated vehicle technologies. I'll wrap up here, and Bill, thank you for the introductions, and hand back to you as I look forward to my other panel members talking. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Roland.
Thank you, Majid.
Our next panelist is Majid Sarvi. He serves as Director of the Transport Technology Program at the University of Melbourne. Professor Sarvi also is founder and director of AIMS. He's played key roles in developing a fully automated highway between Tokyo and Nagoya, optimizing Hong Kong's ferry network, and developing Dubai's master transit plan and the freight master plan for Abu Dhabi.
Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm very delighted to be here, and I would like to acknowledge Kevin Kerrigan for hosting us here, and also his fantastic colleague Susan for showing us around and seeing, what Michigan is doing. Basically, echoing what Roland and Peter Sweetman mentioned. This is a place to be, and we are very delighted to be here and working with you. So I would like to speak a bit about AIMS and telling you what we are doing in Melbourne. So AIMS is standing for Australian Integrated Multimodal Ecosystem, and basically what we have in mind is to using the airborne environment as a ecosystem to testing connected and automated transport system. And what we are focusing on is a multimodal transport system. So what is happening with public transport, what is happening with city logistics, somebody walking or cycling or having a motorbike. So how we could put all of them together and designing a system that is working for everybody. So this is what we have in mind, and that map that you have in front of you is showing where is this is happening. The size of this ecosystem is quite large. It's around 4 mile by 4 mile, and is about 60 mile of road network. So, it has around 50 intersections that we are trying to use in this project. These are the list of our partners. This is not to impress you. It's basically showing how complex it is to tackle transport system in a multimodal and connected way. So you need expertise from communication, from data, from car manufacturing, from public transport operator, from road operator, from technology developer, and you need to integrate them all together in order to be able to tackle large problem that we have in transport systems, such as safety, such as traffic congestion. So you need to work with all of these sectors and basically, being able to understand what is happening in every element of the transport system. So what are some of the objectives of AIMS or transport ecosystem? We would like to make the urban transport safer for everybody walking in part of their journey to work or back home or might be on the bicycle. So we need to be careful about the designing of the system. We're very interested in sustainability. We're very interested to some strategy and policy that government needs to develop in order to ensure the future of transport system for everybody, and also supporting and facilitating emerging technologies and how they can evolve. So one of the elements in AIMS that we would like to consider is that we're having the project for 10 years. So it's not just about one trial or testing one thing. It's about long-term sort of ecosystem that things can come in and go out, and you can look at the evolution of transport during this time. And that's one of the important things. So because you're designing an ecosystem, it's much harder than designing a solution, because when you're designing a solution, you know what you want to do. Whereas when you're having an ecosystem, you need to have flexibility in the core of designing such a system. And basically, it's very obvious what are some of the real life sort of examples of what you can do. You can test things. You can develop basically a solution that cutting through different modes. You can look at the safety and understanding what kind of combination of technology might be useful to addressing particular sort of aspect of transport safety. So you can look at different things. So when we started to design AIMS, people asking me, Majid, what is AIMS? What are you going to do? And I told them, I can simply tell you, transport system is like mobile phone. 10 years ago, those chunky big mobile phone that you had, and we would like to make it like a smart, mobile phone you have in your pocket. So the key is connectivity and basically, looking at all the elements. If you can build that, then you can build enormous number of sort of application. So once you have the platform, the application is the easy part. So that's why we started to do AIMS. And if you're interested, we have a very good website and very good LinkedIn. Please jump in and get in touch, and we're very happy to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid. I like AIMS. There's something about having a test area to simulate an urban setting that's actually an urban setting. So that's kind of unique out there in that area. Our next speaker is John Wall. He's one of Australia's leaders in the application of intelligent transportation systems. Currently, he's program manager for connected and automated vehicles for Austroads, which is the organization of Australian road transport and traffic agencies. He previously held a team, or led a team rather, that deployed the world's largest heavy vehicle cooperative ITS project, which covers 23,000 kilometers of roadway. John?
Thank you, Bill. Oh, my gosh, that's loud. Thank you very much, and thank you to Kevin and Susan and the team for making us so welcome here in Michigan. This is my first trip to the US, and I couldn't think of a better place to actually start my journey in your country other than here in Michigan, where there are some really exciting things happening. Austroads is the peak organisation for road authorities in both Australia and New Zealand. Our members collectively manage more than $250 billion worth of assets, and connected and automated and electric vehicles are certainly a very big topic of discussion for our agencies. Our purpose is to support organisations to deliver an improved transport system for all Australians and New Zealanders. and connected, automated and electric vehicles are going to be a big part of that in the future. To give you a little bit of context, our organisation manages more than 873,000 kilometres of network. I can't give you that in miles, I'm not too up on the conversions, but it is a very extensive network. A small number of cities and a lot of rural and remote roads as part of that network as well. Our activities in Austroads really concentrate on strategic research, promoting consistency across our network, sharing knowledge, conducting business activities and fostering international collaboration. In the Connected and Automated Vehicles program, we're very interested in looking at the realisation of benefits of these emerging technologies, and we're especially concentrating in my program around infrastructure readiness, regulatory readiness and data readiness as well. This gives an oversight of the number of trials and projects that are currently underway in New Zealand, and there's a web link there to take you to the Austroads site to give you a bit of an understanding of all of those particular projects. So we've got some summaries and links back to all of those areas as well. Our program is also very active. We've really only been going for 12 months or so. This is my second week in the position and I'm here in Detroit. How good's that? Part of the project is producing a lot of research reports and technical reports to help road agencies, not just in Australia and New Zealand, but around the world, to really understand what connected and automated vehicles are going to do for our network and what changes we have to make in managing those networks as well. Those reports, and there are 28 of those currently, are available free of charge on the Austroads network. So if you want to hop onto our website, do a login, no charge at all for that, and we won't spam you with email as well. Whoops, and I think that's over to the next presentation. I'll just go back. Thank you, Bill.
John, thank you.
Thanks.
I sense that John is the reality check for the hype that goes around all of this promise of what's to come in the world of advanced mobility. Our final panelist is Susan Harris. She is CEO of ITS Australia, and as such, she operates at the nexus of technology and transport to translate the benefits of intelligent transportation to the Australian community. She has taken a leadership role in several of the country's most significant transportation sector planning groups. Susan?
Thank you. Thanks very much, Bill, and thanks very much to NAIAS and particularly Kevin Corrigan for the great opportunity that we've had this week to really see the breadth and the engagement and the level of enthusiasm for transport tech here in Michigan. I wanted to really use the opportunity today to just give you a sense for the level of engagement and the level of activity that's happening in Australia at the moment in this space. It might seem like it's a long way away, but certainly we've got the same challenges that other people have, and there's certainly a lot of enthusiasm and engagement. We've got everyone up here that are engaged in this sector, from big multinationals. We've got our own homegrown multinationals, organisations like Transurban, that are busy building smart infrastructure locally and internationally, and then also looking at how a CAV is going to integrate with that smart infrastructure and what's the interaction between the emerging vehicles and what's happening in this space at the moment. We've also got multinationals actively investing and engaging in technology in Australia. Brand names that we're all familiar with, Cisco, Cubic Transportation Systems, that are actively investing in new mobility systems in Australia because they see the level of engagement and the opportunities there. We've also got organisations such as Bosch that have got a major research and development facility in Australia, and it's one of their global centres of excellence looking at CAV technology because of the support that they're able to get locally and the level of engagement through organisations such as Melbourne University and the opportunities with the AIMS test bed. So that's at the big end of town, but then we've also got this really diverse startup community in Australia. So we've both got international startups coming to Australia looking to get things going because, again, of the opportunities that they're able to, you know, in a smaller space, sometimes it's easier to make the connections that you need to get your first foot in the door and to get things running. But we've also, as Roland mentioned, we've got some great Australian-grown startups with organisations like Coda Wireless and Seeing Machines that started in our universities in Australia, but are now global players really contributing key technology into the CAV space. So ITS Australia, we're really proud to be working with these organisations in the spark technology sector for over 25 years now. We work closely across government, across academia and industry to create opportunities and really work to shape future transport. So today my real call to you guys is to come over and get engaged. We'd really love to see you over in Australia. ITS Australia is a peak body in this space. We've got a really full calendar of activities and events. Try that again. That brings together all of the players across Australia and the leaders to make it really easy for you to connect with the leaders in that space. So we've got activities such as in May, a new mobility and mass activity, then specialised events focusing really on tolling and road user charging. That may or may not be your thing. That bringing together the private and the public road owners and all of the infrastructure owners and the technology suppliers into that space. And also at the end of the year or later in August, our major ITS summit where we're thinking we'll get around 1,000 delegates coming together and all of the leaders from Australia in that one space looking at CAV technology and what's happening there. So I'd be delighted to connect with any of you that are looking to come out or looking to explore opportunities in Australia. We've got some details there, and jump onto our website and you'll see some of the activities that are happening in Australia. So love to see you there. Thank you, Bill.
Great. Thank you. We have a few minutes here to discuss with this panel some of the things that you've heard about. One of the things that strikes me is what seems to be an extraordinarily high level of cooperation between various levels of government, you know, between the national, kind of state, local level. Is this just, are you just being nice about this, or is there truly a common sense of purpose in all this?
Bill, I might start with that. I think there's always going to be a level of competition between the states, and that's no different in Australia. There is recognition, though, that we need to have our systems, our regulatory and legislative systems, work in a way that ensures that as this technology is deployed, it's going to work in a harmonised manner. And that means works across state borders, but also works in a way that is consistent with international standards. And so those couple of things are, I think, driving forces for governments across Australia. We had an experience in the early 20th century when the country federated, became a nation with rail gauge. We didn't have standard rail gauge across the country, so trains couldn't travel across state borders. Not a great outcome, and sometimes we say we don't want to have the 21st century version of the rail gauge issue.
I think, Bill, our organisation at Austroads level is really working with all of those state agencies, both in Australia and also New Zealand, to bring them together to collaborate. And at an officer level within those public agencies, the cooperation is incredible. But that extends outside of Australia as well. And as I said, the project that I started, which was the largest cooperative ITS freight trial in the world and still is, that all started with a relationship with Umtree and the safety pilot at Ann Arbor. That spread on. We were able to work very closely with Ann Arbor, learn lessons about how they developed, and now our team is passing that on to our colleagues in other jurisdictions that are continuing to evolve. But really it all comes back to what was happening here in 2013 in that connected vehicle on-road space.
And is it Austroads that kind of is the overarching coordinator, if you will, of activities like this at different levels?
No, not at all. We represent our members, so our individual members are the owners of our roads association, but each state still makes its own decisions about what it's going to do. I think one of the challenges for me is to just be able to make sure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing, but still being able to maintain that confidentiality so that our elected officials can get up and announce something that's brand new and the first in Australia and perhaps the first in the world, but still at an officer level be coordinating and talking to each other, especially around these are the lessons we learned. These are some of the shortcuts that we learned in our project that will save you money and time in your project.
Majid, who has access to AIMS? Is this a test bed that anyone in the country or maybe somebody from Michigan or somewhere else can come over and utilize?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the philosophy of AIMS. People come in, bring their idea, integrate, and also, get involved. So we have lots of partners, international partners. We have companies such as Cubic from USA, and we are open to everybody that interested in getting involved and contribute. And it's not just about bringing some technology and try to test it. It's all about bringing also your vision and be part of the ecosystem. And we started from a very simple sort of vision and has been evolved based on collaboration and taking care of pretty much everybody in that ecosystem. And everybody, participated and changed that vision to become something that everybody agreed this is the way forward. So we're very open to anybody to come in and bring their ideas.
Roland, you mentioned something in your comments that I was struck by, and that was the role of automated vehicles in mining. And that brings up a kind of fundamental question in my mind about where all this technology is likely to see applications first. There's certainly in the United States an assumption that all of this is referring to personal vehicles and autonomously driven personal modes of transportation and not in the commercial sector. Yet you do hear occasionally here in this country, people talk about highway trucks being an obvious application and maybe a first realistic application of this technology. How do you, maybe this is for everybody here, but how do you see this playing out in the real world?
Yeah. Look, it's an excellent question, and perhaps the answer is there's no absolutely right answer. The application in the mining sectors in Australia lent themselves to that because of a number of factors. I guess the relatively controllable operational design domain, the real remoteness of some of these mining provinces, and the efficiency, the demonstrable efficiency that could be brought about by the levels of automation. Extending that to where in the more public domains this might go to, I think throws up a range of questions on whether it will be personally owned mobility or, more likely, as many will say, deployment in fleet type arrangements, and fleet type arrangements for heavy vehicles, fleet type arrangements for lighter vehicles, which you might be using in an on-demand type situation. So whether that's ride-hailing services, whether that's fleet services being provided by OEMs, for example, but the prospect of maybe private vehicle ownership, some of those business models, a lot of the research, a lot of the analysis tells us that those models may well change, and the ability to use fleet type models is in all probability one of the ways by which we'll see the earlier penetration of these technologies for consumers more broadly to use.
Peter, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he's on the right track. What do you think? So, from my perspective, which is, I guess, largely in the United States, the application of highly automated vehicles and automated driving systems is going to be in mobility services initially, and that's how users are going to become very comfortable with automation and love automated driving services. We need to get to that point. So that means that we're talking more than just one vehicle or another vehicle and whether it's safe or not, but we're talking about a whole system of vehicles, and not just cars, but also streetcars, buses, pedestrians, people on bikes, and so on. And as we see in AIMS, we see 1 million pedestrian movements through the AIMS testbed every day. So we want to bring that system concept out, because that's how we're going to get a very much broader appreciation of automation, and that's how we can move forward.
Bill, I think in the freight space in Australia, we've got a huge task in freight. For example, I'll give you an example. A major container port on the edge of Sydney, just near Sydney International Airport, our Botany Bay container terminal. To get a container from that terminal off the ship, move it to the western suburbs, which is probably around 10 to 15 miles, the cost of that is actually more than the cost of bringing that container from Tokyo to Australia. So there is a real business case for automation, but also in our huge interstate freight task as well. We can't get younger drivers into the industry. Who wants to be away from home for 5 nights a week and sitting in a cabin for 12 hours a day? It's not the sort of lifestyle that we're attracting younger people into, and our existing drivers are getting older and older every day. But the freight task is not diminishing, it's increasing. So it's ripe for automation.
I was struck by a statistic that you mentioned earlier, that 90% of Australia's population lives in the 5 largest cities. That's an extraordinarily urban-centric population, and yet when you look at these statistics from the United Nations about the future of the global population and its move toward urban areas, in many ways it seems like Australia is already there, and therefore an unusually good test bed for these multimodal applications in an urban setting, because this is what kind of a marketplace you have for this kind of study.
Bill, what we're seeing is that internationally people are looking, particularly in the new mobility solutions. Our cities are quite well suited to these new deployments because they're relatively isolated. So we've got big cities that are complex and able to be good examples of what's happening elsewhere around the world, but they're isolated, so we don't have Melbourne and Sydney right on top of each other. But when we move into other areas around the globe, it can be harder to fence off and do an isolated deployment. But in Australia, we can do one zone and look at a deployment there, and then look at the next city, and then look at the next city. And we also have some major regional centres as well, which are nice examples and opportunities, particularly for some of these emerging deployment opportunities, to look at those regional centres as well. Okay,
great. Any final thoughts from the panel? We're almost out of time here, but I'm impressed by the capabilities that Australia is offering. I agree with you that there should be even more collaborating than there has been, and I'm delighted to hear that there's a connection with Michigan, my home state, and Australia.
Well, I guess as the guy in the middle of this, to some extent, it's been such a pleasure for me to bring my colleagues from Australia and see things like MCity, American Centre for Mobility, and the other programs that we looked at yesterday. And so you can see that it's not only talk, but it's reality. And there's no doubt that Michigan is ahead of every other state in this country, and will continue to be, judging from what we saw yesterday. So it's very inspiring for all of us, and we look forward to maybe returning the favour later in the year.
Very great, good. This is what a love fest, huh? All right, that concludes this panel. Thank you so much for attending, and have a good afternoon looking at the show. Thank you.